Hi guys, this video has been kind of a long time in the making. Kind of took a short 2-week break there because of the hurricane and some life events that were going on. And now I want to get back on track and see if we can get this installing software video out of the way. This is going to be a beginner-based video, so it's going to show you how to do it in both GNOME and KDE. We're going to primarily be using the GUI interface, the graphical interface. But we are going to dabble a little tiny bit into the terminal with a couple of one-liners that will help you do a few things you might end up wanting to do, like enabling multiple architectures. So if you're running a 64-bit operating system and you want to run some 32-bit packages, I'll show you how to do that with a one-liner, because I think that might be important for some people. And I'll show you how to, download and install packages and use a product called GDebi to install from the GUI a deb that you download from the internet, and we're going to do that with Steam. And that will require some terminal work, but not much. All the terminal work will be one-liners. They'll be simple to do. You will not have needed to watch the terminal video in order to do these commands. You just basically type the command in, press enter, and then you're done. So that's it. So let's begin with the GNOME side of things. So if we push this up here, put in our password, which is password, and unlock the unlock the system. If I could type word, there you go. Okay. There. All right. Now, in GNOME, there are two different software package management solutions. There is Synaptic and there is software. Synaptic is the more complicated version. That's more for advanced users, whereas software is very chopped down. You basically just click things and install it. So we're going to start with Synaptic because Synaptic will give you the ability to do some early things that we need to do. There we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is, this is going to look a bit intimidating, like you got a bunch of options everywhere. So I'm going to break this down a little bit. First, on the side here, you basically have some groups of different kinds of packages. Okay, so if you want to download and install something, that would be a game, you'd scroll down and look for games and amusement, and then you'd have all the games that are on Debian available to you. Essentially, you just check the box you want, and then do mark for installation, and then it will mark all of the dependencies as well. So you click mark, and then you'll hit apply, and that will install those packages. So that's the way you would install something. To unmark them, you come up to edit and you go to unmark all, and that will remove the checks from all the packages that you had marked. If you have a package that is installed, so if we go back up to all here, actually there may be a way to look at just installed packages, status, and then installed. You can look at all the packages that are installed. So if you want to remove one, say ACL, Access Control List here, if we want to remove that, we would just check it and do mark for removal or mark for complete removal. So the difference between removal and complete removal is just remove, whereas complete removal is purge. And basically what that means is that if you do a regular removal, it will just delete the software, whereas if you do a complete removal or a purge, it will delete the software and all of the configurations and everything that came down with that software, log files, etc., and so forth. So it's a little bit nicer to do a normal removal, but in some cases, especially if you want to try to keep your system clean, you might want to do a complete removal. If you know you're going to be reinstalling the software, either use mark for reinstallation or mark for removal to do that. I'm not going to actually remove anything here because I don't want to, but I'll show you how it actually looks now that I think about it. So if I mark this for removal, right, and then I hit mark because it's going to remove all the dependencies as well, you're going to see this little X, but that's not going to actually do anything until you click apply, just as when you install things. This basically just queues these actions up, and then you can click apply. Of course, I'm going to come up to edit again and unmark them because I don't want to actually make changes to the system. So that is basically how you install and remove packages, and the gist over here is that you have different sections. You can also do origins, which shows the different repositories that you have enabled, and gives you the ability to select which packages are in different repositories. So if you enabled a specific repository and wanted to find only those packages, you could do that. You can also make custom filters, search results, and you can search by architecture. And as you can see, I've already got the i386 architecture, which is the 32-bit architecture, enabled, which I'll show you guys how to do. But for now, that's actually gonna require some terminal work. So for now, we're gonna assume that that's not enabled, and we're just gonna continue working normally here until we get to that terminal part of the video, and then I'll show you a little bit more about that. Anyway, so once you if you want to enable a package or a repository, or just mess with the repositories or view them or whatever, you're going to go to Settings and you're going to click Repositories, and in here you're going to get a little menu. And so over here, basically, you have the officially supported or main repository. If you've just installed Debian, that will be all that is enabled. If you want to install, say, the free or the proprietary NVIDIA driver that is packaged within Debian, or proprietary AMD drivers, or proprietary wireless firmware or whatever, to try and get something working that isn't, you will need to enable both the contrib and the non-free repositories. So this one would be the free repository, the main one. That's the one that should be enabled by default on a standard system that has just been installed and not altered, and these two will not be enabled, and you can check them. Source code may be enabled for you. If you're not going to be compiling from source, you can disable that, and it might make your package refreshes a little quicker, which would be nice. You can also tell it to download from the main server. This is where you can set, like, if you want a different like a different mirror, so you can select different Debian mirrors here, which you can decide what you want to do there, whatever's closest to you. But you should have actually picked that in your installation process, and if you did that correctly, you shouldn't have to worry about changing that. Okay, so let's go over to other software. Other software is where you would go if you had another package software repository that you'd installed. Like if you wanted some piece of software that isn't distributed with Debian, but they make their own Deb repositories, you can absolutely install them. So you can go to Add here, and then you'll paste the apt line they have, which will look something similar to this. In here, if it's a source line, it'll be deb src. If it's a normal Debian repository with binaries or executable files in it, it'll be just a deb. And you can just paste that line in there and click add source, and you'll see it appear in this list. For it to actually be in effect, though, you're going to want to hit the check mark next to it. Speaking of check marks, these are the CD-ROMs, and one of these may be enabled by default. If they are, you should uncheck them unless you plan on installing from your CD-ROM, which I doubt you do, because it's better to just get your software from Debian or one of its mirrors, because that way you get the newest versions of everything and you can patch and stuff like that. Whereas the CD-ROMs are very static, and you can only get what's on the CD-ROMs. If you want to add another CD-ROM or scan in another CD-ROM, you use add volume for that, which you can see that it just added one, which I'm going to remove, because the CD-ROM for the installing of Debian here is still mounted on this system, so that's why it added another one just like it. But that is how you basically do that. Updates, and here you can tell it to install or enable the security updates for stretch and the stretch updates for recommended updates. You can tell it if you want to do automatic installation of updates, which probably just configures the unattended updates package for you. There is a manual way to do that, and I'll demonstrate that in the other video I'm going to do that's more advanced. But this, I believe, just automatically sets up unattended updates for you. You can configure those settings as you like. I, of course, recommend that you check both of these boxes here. Authentication is like if you have key files. So if you install a repository, the repository should all be what they call GPG signed. It's a security feature that prevents malicious code from getting into the repository unbeknownst to the developers of the software who put the code up there. So if somebody tries to inject code into a package and then distribute it through that official repository, apt or Debian here is going to flag that as being evil because the GPG keys will not match. The software will not be signed appropriately, and so you will know not to install it. So if you get a new repository from a third party, all of their packages will be flagged as not trusted because you don't have the keys. So usually when you download or install another repository into your system, along with that they'll put whatever key you need to add into your system up there. So for that you can download that key file into a text file or just some file, it doesn't matter what the extension is, and then you click import key file here, and then you can point it at your key and it will import that key in here, and you'll see that as a listed key. There are keys on this system, it just looks blank like this because it does not list the keys that are there for the official Debian repositories. You cannot remove those keys. Well, you could remove them, it's just more difficult than what this makes it more difficult to do because there really aren't many circumstances in which removing those keys would be a good idea. And then of course there's developer options where you can do proposed updates. That's up to you if you want to enable it or not. But of course that might introduce instability in your software, so you might not want to enable that. But if you like more bleeding edge kind of software, proposed updates might be a good way for you to get some slightly newer packages. Although Debian stable is still ultimately Debian stable, and you're not going to get packages that are like bleeding edge in Debian stable. That's not a thing unless you go out of your way to make it a thing. So that's generally the options that you're going to want to do. You're definitely going to want to check these two most likely if you have Wi-Fi that's not working, or if you want better video drivers. But if you're happy with the normal stuff, then you can just leave things default. I definitely recommend unchecking your CD-ROM here and just using a mirror, unless you're on like a closed network or a network that doesn't have like internet access or access to a repository that you can get Debian packages from. So once you've got that, you just click close, and then it'll tell you your repositories have changed, at which point you can click the reload button. It will rescan your repositories and give you a list of new things. Now you might have noticed that error that you saw there. For some reason that happens in Synaptic. I'm not positive why. There is a fix for that though. Basically if you launch your terminal, that's the easiest way to fix it, unfortunately. There's a file that you can move. So if we go to, actually if we just do mv, right, the file is etc, which, sorry, you're going to need sudo, or you're going to need to elevate to root with su, like so. You can do that, or you can just use sudo. I'm just going to use sudo, but I wanted to show you that was an option if you didn't have sudo enabled, for instance. So sudo, and then you can just do mv for move, and then you can do etc sources. SOURCES sources. Oh, I'm sorry, it's apt. And then in here you should have this trusted GPG. You're just going to move that. We'll move it into tilde for home, and you're just going to give it your password. Okay, so that's going to move that file. So now if you ls, you shouldn't see it there anymore. And in fact it'll recreate it is what will happen. And actually the reason you see it is because I LS'd my home directory, because I never did a CD, so I'm still in home. So you can see that the trusted GPG is in my home. Now why did I move it? I could have deleted it. I moved it because in case there's a problem, in case that breaks my package manager or something, you can just move it back. So usually if some set of commands on the internet somewhere tells you to delete something, just move it. Don't delete it, right? Move it, move it, move it, move it. Unless you know for a fact that it's going to work, don't delete it, move it, right? After you move it and test it and realize, hey, it works, then delete it. But don't ever delete it first. Always move, then delete. Okay, now if we go back to our Synaptic here and we reload our repositories again, you'll notice that error should be suppressed and not come back up. It's something about the GPG keys. It's when you go into the repository and mess with the GPG keys. It's probably because I went to add one and didn't complete the addition of it. but I'm not sure. I normally do not see that error on Debian systems at all. It's just for some reason Synaptic seems to introduce that problem, and it seems to be when you mess with the GPG keys in that menu system. So if you do get that error, follow those steps that I showed you about moving that trusted GPG file, and you should be good to go. Alright, so that's about it for Synaptic. The only other thing I'm going to show you is there's a search feature up here, but it's only okay. I don't like this search feature. A better way to search is to just click in here and then start typing. So in this case, I'll do Steam, and you can see that it finds what you're looking for. This search does work, and it will narrow things down. But one thing I've noticed, like if you go to architectures and you type Steam here, you can see that I have the i386 package of Steam. But if I go up here and I type Steam, STEAM, and then search for description and name, it will not find it. So the reason that happens is this, for some reason, does not, or it refuses to search for i386 packages sometimes, but oddly it does find some. So yeah, that's not as reliable as I would like. And actually, if you're going to install i386 packages, I almost recommend you do the terminal instead. So at the end of the video, I will give you some terminal work that will show you how to enable multi-architecture and install i386 packages. And I'll well, obviously you've seen, you just go down here to architecture and then type what you want, Steam. All these that have the i386 after them are i386 or 32-bit packages. So you can then just check this and mark it for installation, and then it will install, obviously. That's the i386 version of the Steam installer. I believe there's a 64-bit version of the Steam installer that you can get straight from Steam. That's up to you if you want to do that or not. I usually recommend trying to stick with what's in the repositories for Debian, because it's built to work with Debian, and it just works. I hate to use that Apple mantra, but it's a lot easier to just use what's in the repositories. But if you really want the 64-bit or whatever the new 64-bit client is for Steam, you can absolutely install that just by downloading the deb from the Steam website. And I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on as well when we get into something called GDebi. So let's go ahead and X out of Synaptic, because we're pretty done with that. And we'll take a look at software. This one's going to go really quick because it's a very simple tool. So software is very chopped down. So if you're going to want to manipulate your repositories, or change your keys, or do anything more advanced, you're going to want to use Synaptic. Okay, software is basically just an app store. It's more akin to Google Play than anything else, and it has almost no settings or no way to manipulate anything. If you right-click on the toolbar, you'll get some basic toolbar manipulation stuff, and if you right-click in the middle anywhere, you're not going to get anything. You can choose categories like games, for instance, and it looks like it's taken a second to pop up, but you can then click on one of the games, and then you can come in here and you can view snapshots about the game. This is actually very, very good for looking at descriptions or discovering software. So you can click through descriptions of the game and see details about the game. You can even get reviews on the game and that sort of thing. It functions a lot more like a traditional app store. So it's a lot prettier, but it's also a lot more limited. It's also not going to show you individual library packages, whereas Synaptic will show you a lot more. Anyway, if you click on install, it will install the package. If the package is already installed, so if I go back here, let's see, yeah, you can come over here to installed, and you can see that the button is now remove. If you click remove, it will go away. You can also click updates, and it will tell you if your software is up to date or not. If you click the refresh button, it will look for new updates. That's akin to reloading the repositories, and you can see that there are OS updates. And you can see that it's a Linux image, so it's actually a kernel update is what that is. I'm actually not going to bother doing that right now because it's just not important for me to do it right now, because this is just a demonstration system and I don't want to waste a bunch of time doing it. So anyway, that is software. And actually there's one more thing I do want to show you about Synaptic, so let me launch that one more time. So another thing about software is it will only need you to type in your password once you go to install something, whereas Synaptic wants you to do it at the beginning. That's another small difference. Not a big deal, but it is a difference. So anyway, what I wanted to show you about Synaptic is if you select one of the packages, say 0AD, you'll notice down here you get a description of that package as well. You can also get a screenshot of the package, and you can get I don't know if you can get more than one screenshot, but you can get a screenshot, and you can also get a change log on the package, which will show you, you know, what's changed since the last versions, etc. So this does give you some descriptions, but it's not nearly as pretty or nice looking as the software package manager. So if you are a normal user who's just wanting to install and remove packages and your system is mostly configured, stick with software. If you're more advanced and you want to change more things and get into the real, you know, what's really going on, if you want to really troubleshoot a problem, Synaptic is your better bet if you want to avoid the terminal. But my personal opinion is if you're smart enough to use Synaptic and you want to actually go into Synaptic and start getting into how to really troubleshoot a Linux system, learn the terminal. It will serve you so much better. Alright, so now that we've done the GNOME side of things, let's check out the KDE side and see what's up over there. So first we're going to look at, so this is the KDE side, so let's do... Alright, and we'll let our desktop load up. Alright, so this is your typical KDE desktop, and the two applications I want to call our attention to, they're slightly different from what's on the GNOME side. And of course, if you want, you can install Synaptic on KDE. You can install KDE's versions on GNOME, although I always recommend that you stick to Qt-based KDE applications on KDE and GTK-based GNOME applications on the GNOME desktop. This will make for a much more lightweight system, whereas if you install stuff from, you know, GNOME on the KDE desktop, that means you've got all these GNOME dependencies and libraries coming across, making your system a bit heavier. But you absolutely can do it. There's nothing technically preventing you from doing it, and if your system is powerful enough, why not? That's, you know, it's kind of up to you. But anyway, so what you want to do is just click on your, you know, your little K icon here, and then you can just start typing, and you can type in Discover, D-I-S-C-O-V-E-R. That is the first software package manager that you want to use, and if you like, you can even add it as a launcher or add it to your favorites. If you add it to your favorites, it's going to appear over here in your favorites. So when you click on your Start menu, you'll have Discover. If you are a normal Linux user or a new Linux user who does not want to mess with a terminal very much, I recommend pinning at least the Software Center to your favorites so that you can get to it quickly or find it quickly, or just remember that it's called Discover. Another thing you might want to do is, depending on your preference, you may notice that here it calls out the word File Manager instead of Dolphin. Dolphin is the actual name of the application. File Manager is what the application is. So you may not like that, and if you don't, you can right click on this little K icon down here, and you can click on Application Launcher Settings. And in here, you're going to click this middle checkbox. I prefer to have this on. It is off by default. If you check that, then you'll notice that that now it says Dolphin and then File Manager is underneath it. I prefer to know the name of the application because I'm used to them, but some people don't. Some people want to know what the application does, especially if they're coming over from Windows and they're not used to the names of things on Linux yet. So you can decide for yourself which way you prefer that. So anyway, in here, if you click on Discover, you'll get your KDE Discover Center. Now, the one thing to note about the KDE versions of these software center sort of applications are Discover is a bit more heavy. It'll take longer to launch, and it's slower and clunkier in my opinion, although it is very, very pretty, and it's a lot more functional than GNOME's software application. But GNOME's software application is much more lightweight and has a lot fewer options. So unlike software, though, Discover does have a settings menu. So you can click on this settings menu, and here you can see you have a basic sort of dependency kind of, or not dependency, but repository situation. You can even drag these. I think you can drag them up and move them. Oh no, that's a delete. Okay, so you can delete this thing here. If you just swipe this over, you can delete it. You can also uncheck it here, or unbullet it if you don't want it to be included in your results. If you want to add one, you'd come up here to More, and then you can go to Software Sources, and in here you'll have to give your password, which should, oops. Which should launch. Okay, yes. So there is a trick now that I want to show you guys, because that was not my sudo password. For some reason, KDE is a little bit more interested in the root password to the system. If you did not enable the root user and you just went with sudo, you may run into a situation where you can't authenticate there. So I'm going to show you how to resolve that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to type in terminal. Because yes, the terminal really is the easiest way to do this. And let me just switch this so that you guys can see it a little bit better. We'll do Control plus. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to type in passwd and then root. And you may actually need to be root to do it, so you're going to want to use sudo as well. So the full command will be sudo passwd root. You're going to press enter. It's going to ask you for your sudo password, so go ahead and type that in. Then it's going to ask you for your new Unix password. You're going to give it the root password you want it to have. It's going to ask you to confirm it, and that's it. Your root account is now enabled, and that password you just entered is going to be the password you would put into this box when you click on Software Sources. That will enable your root account for you to be able to do root level stuff if you need. Now, the difference though is that you're not going to be able to log in as root. KDE disables that by default. You will be able to log in if you go to like a TTY terminal. If you don't understand what a TTY terminal is, don't worry about it. If you're a normal user, you won't need to know what that is, generally speaking, unless you get into deep troubleshooting mode, which other videos in the series will show you how to do. But for those of you who are just interested in avoiding the terminal at all costs, that is the last little bit of the terminal for the time being that we're going to deal with. So that's not too bad, I hope. Anyway, that's going to give you the ability to bring up this little box here. Again, you can check these two and uncheck source code. Over here, you can make sure these two are not checked. In updates, you can check security updates, recommended updates. You can choose to check proposed updates, or you can choose not to. It shouldn't be checked by default, but you can absolutely decide, I want to get the newest updates possible at all times. That doesn't mean you're going to get like brand new versions of LibreOffice or something. If you really want that, there are ways to get it, and I'll show you that in later videos. But for now, I'm going to leave that unchecked. And then you can tell it, this is basically where you can configure your automatic updates. So here you can tell it I want daily, weekly, every 2 weeks, whatever. Down here you can tell it to install security updates. You can tell it to download all updates in the background. You can, you can just feel out the options that you want here. Here you can tell it what releases you want for new distributions. I just do normal releases here. And then authentication is the same thing as the other system, where you can import a key or not, depending on if you have a new repository that you're installing, which again you can enable through other software. It's very, very similar to what we saw in the original setup. Or not the original setup, but the GNOME configuration in Synaptic. It's very similar to that. The only major difference is that in updates here, these proposed updates are in there, or in this tab here, and it doesn't say, hey, this might cause instabilities in your system. Then this also gives you the ability to do statistical information, so you can submit statistical information about what you install if you want. It's a package called Popularity Contest. You can also enable it in the installer of Debian when you're actually installing your system for the first time. If you want to configure that setting, this is where you can check or uncheck this to actually tell it to or not to send that information out. That's up to you. These are VMs for my purposes. I'm not going to bother because they're VMs. Everything I do here is for demonstration. That information probably wouldn't be very interesting to anybody anyway. So then you're just going to click the reload button. It's going to refresh the software cache, and then it's going to, for some reason, whenever you play around in that setting, it causes weird issues. You do check for updates and see if it does it again. Nope. That's just a weird quirk of the software, looks like. I'm not really sure what that error was about. Yeah, that's an odd one. So I want to point out for the record that this is a very difficult video for me to do because I'm basically demonstrating applications that I do not use ever. I don't use any of these methods to install software in Debian. The methods I use will be in the next video, and I use those methods exclusively. So I'm basically demonstrating stuff that I don't generally do very often, so hopefully this is all easy to follow and good for new users. But it is very, very difficult for me to break this stuff down into a new user perspective who doesn't want to use the terminal, because I live in the terminal, because I'm an actual Linux professional. I work professionally in on Linux and like for my job, and so I do a lot of terminal work. But anyway, other than that, back to installing software on this thing. The actual, to install or remove software is pretty self-explanatory. You just click whatever category you want. So let's do games, because that seems to be popular. And then you can click install, and that's it. It'll grab the dependencies and install the software. This particular package, though, of course, is not very good at showing you the libraries that go along with the software. So if you're missing a library, or you want a library for some reason, if you're a developer, this is not the package manager for you. If you're a developer, you should be using the terminal anyway. But this is more along the lines of if you want to just install something, hey, I want to install 3D chess, click, done. You can also click on these and you'll get, a picture and a description of it and that sort of thing. So that is Discover in a nutshell. It's pretty easy. It's not too bad. It's a little weird and quirky in places, but overall it's all right. I hear the newer versions of these software packages in the newer KDE is a lot better. And hopefully we'll get to see that when Debian 10 Buster becomes a new stable distribution. Or you can install that now if you're impatient and don't mind occasional quirks and weirdness in your software. Anyway, that's Discover. The next one is Apper. Apper is a little bit more akin to Synaptic, although it is, I think, more user-friendly than Synaptic, more new user-friendly anyway. So this is what Apper looks like. It has sort of an App Store feel to it. So for instance, you can click on one of these and you'll get a list of packages, but it's more like Synaptic in that it will show you more of what's on your system. You can filter it to just applications, excluding libraries and extra components and stuff. But so if you go to filters here, for instance, you can say I only want to show applications, which will filter out libraries. But if you want to see everything in the repository, you can click you can uncheck that, and then you can see library packages and other things. So like for instance, if we look at GNOME, you can scroll down and actually probably be easier just to search. So if we do lib, we should start seeing some libraries pop up hopefully. I think that may have been an overzealous search. Yeah, so you can see you've got libraries here, right? So if I take this and I filter this where it'll only show applications, you won't see any libraries. You can see the list is much, much smaller. So libraries are shared code between applications so that the actual applications themselves can be much smaller. So in Linux, the more applications you have, the smaller your applications technically become in a weird sort of way. Because of shared libraries. So for instance, if I install one game, then I might have a large download because I don't have any of the libraries that games tend to share. But after I install the second and third games, those will be much, much smaller because then you only need the new content that makes that game different from the other game, for instance. And that's particularly apparent with stuff like Office software or stuff that uses a lot of libraries in common. KDE software or GNOME software is a really good example of this, because if you have a KDE system and you install more KDE software, the software will look really, really, really small, even though it's really big and has a lot of dependencies. But if you try to install that same software on the GNOME system, you'll see that the software is much larger and you'll be pulling down a ton more dependencies because you're in need of stuff that's actually missing. Whereas if you're using a KDE system, all those dependencies will already be there, for instance. So that is basically how this particular application software works. You can click on installed software and you can get a list of everything that's installed on the system. You know it's installed because it has a check mark next to it. Also, it'll have a remove button instead of an install button, so you can click that and you can click remove. You'll also be able to get a description of what those software packages are, so you can see and you can read about them. You can also come over here and click more and you can see depends on. This is kind of nice because it'll show you what software this particular application depends on. So in order to have this icon theme here, you need to have the GTK update icon cache and the high color icon theme and the lib RSVG2 common packages installed, and those might have other dependencies as well that go up the chain. So dependency chains can be nightmarish if you really want to dig into all that. So the other things you can do is you can hit required by, and you'll get a list of all the packages that require this package. So if you want to install iBus preferences, you need this icon theme, for instance. You can also get a file list, which will show you all of the files that install when you install that package, which you can see because it's an icon theme, it's going to go into user share icons and then the name of the theme, which is Adwaita, I guess. Not really sure how they officially pronounce that, but that's how I've always pronounced it. Anyway, so that is Apper in a nutshell. Also, you can come over here and you can click on settings. So it's that little, I guess they call it the burger menu. I'm not really sure what the proper name for those 3 slashes are, but I've heard it referred to as the burger menu for some reason. Anyway, you're going to click those little 3 dashes, the menu icon, and you're going to click settings, and then in here you can tell it when to check for software updates, that sort of thing. Editing these software update checker settings, that is a conf file in your system that you're really editing. This is just a front end. So when you edit it here, it's also going to edit it in Discover. So what I'm saying is they will not conflict. So you don't need to worry about editing it in Discover and editing it in here and having them behave differently and having it check for updates, a bunch of extra times, etc. and so forth. If you just edit it in one, it will change it in the other. You can also go to Software Origins, and this is where you're going to set up your. You can check and uncheck basically what software is coming down. If you want to be more advanced, you can also come over here and click Edit Origins, and this is where it's going to ask you for your root password. And you can see here it says please enter root's password. That means it's looking for the root password and not your sudo password. So that's going to be the password we set up when we enabled the root account. So that will allow us to open up this, which is much the same as we already saw. In fact, it's probably the same exact dialog. I'm betting it uses the exact same code. It's just a shared library between these 2 software packages, which which you should kind of understand better now because we talked about that just a minute ago. So this is exactly the same, so I'm not going to go through it again, but that is how you edit your sources here. So that is that. There is one other thing that I can show you, so I want to show you this, GDebi. GDebi is a piece of software that you can install. It installs what's called deb files. So actually I think It is not, okay, it's not installed by default. So this is the GDebi package installer and the GDebi here. I think the package installer is the actual core thing. So if we go to filters, for instance, and only show applications, yeah, this is what we're actually going to click install on. So this is a demonstration of how to actually install the software. So if you click the install button, okay, yeah, so if you click the install button, it puts it in this pending changes here. So once it's in the pending changes, you just click apply, and then it will give you a list of everything it's actually going to do. And you'll notice that it's not actually just installing GDebi, it's installing a whole bunch of extra stuff here. Those are your dependencies. So we're going to click continue, and we're going to tell it to install with our root password. Oh. That was our sudo password. So that was, I wish this was more consistent with what password you actually need to type, and also these graphical glitches up here don't look very pretty. So yeah, it's a little, I don't know if I like Apper that much, because it's a little inconsistent with how to install particular things. But what I'm going to show you now, as you can see, that is installed. And if you look in our menu now, and I type GDebi, you can see that it's already in our menu. We can open it up and view it. And of course it's going to say this package does not exist because we haven't specified a package file for it. It's not really meant to be launched from your menu, even though it's installed there, oddly. What it's meant to do is be installed or launched with a deb file. So what we're going to do is we're going to go get us a deb file. And we're going to do it not with Conqueror, because nobody uses Conqueror, or maybe some people use Conqueror, I don't know, but I don't use Conqueror, I use Firefox. So Firefox ESR, which actually I believe Firefox ESR has been upgraded from the 550 whatever series to the 60 series, so now Firefox ESR on an updated Debian system should be the newer Firefox. Actually, I think this is the newer Firefox, yes. So that's kind of neat, I suppose. I sort of liked having the old Firefox available, but I think the old Firefox has gone out of life cycle now, so it's no longer supported, which is why Debian upgraded, because they track it to the oldest supported version of Firefox, essentially. The oldest supported version of the long-term support release of Firefox is what will be in Debian stable, usually. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to, we're just going to search for Steam, actually. And if you go to Welcome to Steam, in here, you're going to click on Install Steam, and Install Steam now. This is going to give you a deb file. Just save it. I mean, you can just tell it to launch with GDebi KDE if you want, but I prefer to just save it in case there's errors or issues. Okay, that's going to save the file. You'll see that it's done. All right. Then we're going to come over here and we're going to launch Dolphin. Dolphin is our file manager, and then in here we're going to go to Downloads, where it downloaded to, and we're just going to double click our .deb file, which should launch with our oops, I accidentally launched it twice, which should launch with our GDebi package manager, which looks like I launched it quite a few times actually. So I'm going to kill off the extra ones. Okay, so I have this set up here, and you can see that it's got some details here, and you can see that it's got some to be installed stuff. So you're going to click Install Package, and then you're going to give it your administrative credentials. So that may be your sudo. Yeah, that took my sudo password. Remember, if it doesn't take your sudo password, try your root password. It's going to install dependencies. And then it's going to say that it was done. That's it. You're good. So now, once I launch Steam for the first time, because I have Steam now, you can see that it's installed and it works. And it's going to need to install some additional packages. So you can give it, I think, your normal password, because it asks for a password for your account here, not root. So that's your sudo password, if they're not the same. Here you can say yes to install the packages. And this is basically installing i386 stuff. You may not have i386 stuff on your system. If you don't, and you get an error here, I'll show you how to do it. But really, I don't think installing Steam this way is worth it. Like I said, you want to install it with the normal, in the normal way, through the package manager. So it's better to enable multi-architecture. Now, on this system, multi-architecture is already enabled. So if you got an error there, it may be because it didn't find the dependencies, and that may confuse you. What you can try to do is launch a terminal, which if you just type terminal or console with a K and bring this guy up, let me just increase the text size here. Okay. If you do sudo dpkg add architecture, and that will actually tab out. So here you can do i386 like that, and then it'll ask for your password. You're going to give it your normal sudo password because you used the sudo method here. Hang on. There you go. Okay, and that should do it. That'll give you access to the packages. Now you're going to do sudo apt. Actually, you can either go to one of your programs, like Apper or whatever, and reload, check for updates, whatever, or you can do sudo apt update, if you like, in the terminal, and it will check for updates that way. And after that, all of your packages will become available, which actually, yes, it looks like yeah, it looks like so. It looks like that that our package is not being trusted because of the Steam key is not available. So this added a repository to the system and doesn't have a key for it. So that's why we're seeing all these weirdo errors, and that's why, in my opinion, it is much better to simply run the i386 install from the actual repository itself. So what we can do, which actually it looks like, there we go. Okay, my VM is going a little bit, it is being a little bit sluggish. So this is actually a much more easier and painless process if you just use the repository version of the package. The thing is, I'm not sure, which I guess the actual Steam package still uses 32-bit library, so it's still probably a 32-bit package. Although I had heard that 64-bit Steam packages were supposedly on the way. It doesn't look like that's the case, because they're still using 32-bit libraries. Which is probably very much the case, because I'm betting there's still some games out there that require the 32-bit libraries, so that's probably why. So yeah, if you're going to be running video games, you're going to want your i386 architecture enabled, essentially. But now we should be able to launch Steam if we want. Which this VM is going very slow. It's making me sad. Okay, so yep, and there you can see that Steam is there. It's working. I'm not actually going to log into Steam or whatever, but you can see that it is in fact running. So there's a better way to do this, though. So now I'm going to show you how to remove packages. So let's launch Discover, and we'll type in Steam. Steam. There we go. Nope. Okay. It is not finding Steam the way I would hope that it would. and it very apparently doesn't even show it as an installed package here, so that is unfortunate. So what we'll do instead is we'll do the terminal method here, sudo apt auto remove steam purge. And it says Steam i386 is not installed. That's clever. Yeah. Okay, it's because it installs it as Steam Launcher. Yeah, we'll just yank that out of there. So the better way to install this, which on KDE you may not actually be able to do, it depends on if this guy will show us the Steam package for i386, but I'm not sure this guy will actually give us the filter. It may not show us i386 or 32-bit packages, so you may not be able to just install Steam easily in KDE through the graphical interface. And if that's the case, that's perfectly fine. It's actually still very easy to install anyway. So all you have to do is do sudo apt install steam and then press yes. You're going to agree to this license, so just press enter. Okay, I agree. And that, my friends, is that. It's actually pretty trivial to get it going. Either method, however you want to work it. I think the recommended way is definitely to just do it through the terminal like that, or to do it on the GNOME side of things through Synaptic, because you can search the multi-arch packages. I don't know if there's a way to really search for the multi-arch packages in these software applications. So, I apologize for not knowing that, but I don't think there is. So what you can do instead is just do this terminal command here, which is really, really trivial to do. I mean, it's a one-liner. So just enable your multi-arch packages, do an update, and then do this. Sudo apt install steam. And then tell it yes, enter a password when it asks for it, and then that's it. You'll have Steam. So now I can launch Steam. You can see that after uninstalling it and reinstalling it is in fact still there. You can see that it is doing the update process because we totally purged all of its software out of it when we did the auto remove tac purge. That destroyed all the software that came down with the other steam.deb package that I had. And this will give me the updated Steam from the version that's in the repository. And either way, you'll get the newest version of Steam. It's fine. It's just a matter of how do you install it. And for the record, I play all my games, modern games, whatever, through Steam using the repository method of installation. I don't use the deb that comes down from the Steam webpage. I think that deb is actually for Debian-based distributions that may not have it already prepackaged like Debian does. Or if for some reason the Debian prepackaged one becomes obsolete, maybe that will lead to getting it installed. But anyway, that ought to cover pretty much everything. That sets up multi-architecture, depackaged TAC-I. There is one other trick I want to show you guys. It's a terminal based trick. So basically what this is if you install something through GDebi or any other piece of software, like if you download a deb file and then you do dpkg tac-I and install the .deb file, if it's missing a dependency that you know is in the repository, or if it doesn't install properly, one of the things you can try is doing sudo and then apt and then install, and then tac F like that. And don't give it any other things, just that command. And then you press enter. It will, if there's a package that has a partial installation or isn't configured properly, what that will do is it will tell it clean up that installation by installing any necessary dependencies or whatever. And if it can't resolve a dependency, then it will give you the option to remove whatever software you attempted to install, which will unbrick your apt process so that you can install software and updates again. So that's a very handy command to have. And unfortunately, that's one of those things that I think you might be able to do with Synaptic. I'm not sure. Let's actually check that. Because, let's see. So if we come back over here, I think there's a way to do this in Synaptic. So let's launch Synaptic. Right. So in Synaptic, give it just a second to repopulate the packages, because unfortunately these things, I think, reload the library on launch. So yeah, I think fix broken packages here, I think that is technically the equivalent of the tac F command. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe that's the case. So if you're in GNOME, you actually have a slightly easier time of it with package management than you do in KDE, in my opinion. And that's mostly because Synaptic is amazing. Of course, you always have the ability in KDE, if you want to use Synaptic, to install it. So you can see our Steam installation went just fine, and now it's running. Of course, I'm not going to log into it because it would just take too much effort. But to show you, like, I can go over here to Apper, for instance, right? And then I can come up here and type synaptic. I think it's TIC. Yes, and I can click this and I can click install. And then I can click apply. And you can see it's going to pull down all these packages, which actually isn't that bad. And now, Synaptic Package Manager is available in KDE. And there you have it. And now you can install stuff just the same way you could on GNOME through KDE. So that's sort of the versatility of Linux. Yeah, there are some quirks in some places. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'm not going to pretend like there aren't issues. Obviously there are. We saw a couple of them during this demonstration. But the beauty of it is that it is extremely versatile. If there's a particular way you want to do something, just install whatever you need to do it the way that makes you happy. If you like Synaptic, use Synaptic. Even if you're on KDE, it doesn't matter. You know, Linux is modular in that you can rip components out and push components in and move things around and do whatever you want to do in order to get the task that you want to accomplish done. And that is the power of the Linux platform, is its modularity. So if you like Synaptic, which I love Synaptic, if I was going to use something other than the terminal, it would absolutely be Synaptic. It is the best package manager on the market, in my opinion, because it shows you everything and it gives you most of the stuff that you would need to successfully manage your packages without having to delve into the terminal, because it is so complete. The other ones, I think, have a lot of gaping holes in what they do. They're really, really great if the system's all set up and configured for you, and you already have Steam in place, and your multi-arch is already enabled, and you already have everything you want from it. Then yes, software is perfect. It's really, really lightweight and easy to use. It's very simple for somebody who just wants to click on packages and install them. You know, if you're going to give a computer that you've pre-configured to like your grandparents or something, and you've already configured it so you have all the problems out of the way, just letting them use the software package is probably a very good idea. Maybe Discover if they're on KDE. But But for somebody who wants to troubleshoot or install stuff and know what's really going on or get more information, Synaptic, in my opinion, is the best tool for the job. Or just use the terminal. Like, that's how I do it. And the next video will demonstrate that really thoroughly, I think. Because I'm going to go through all of the commands that I showed today in the terminal will probably be shown in that video as well as a ton more. So by the time you get done watching that video, you should be fairly skilled with apt at the very least. So that is the overall how to install stuff mostly through the GUI tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope it did not confuse anyone, because I felt like there were some places where I was kind of all over the place. But it takes a lot of effort to edit these videos, so I don't know that I'm going to go through and change it. Maybe in the future I'll record a version 2. I'm not sure. But yeah, so hopefully that gave you some insight, and hopefully it wasn't too overly technical, because I worry that I may confuse new people, and then, you know, I find it difficult to break it down, because for me, things that seem obvious might not to somebody who's new. So, you know, if you have any critiques or comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I'm absolutely reading them. I love constructive criticism, so just keep it constructive, hopefully. But yeah, so if there's any other types of videos that you want to see that aren't on my list or aren't planned, or you have stuff that you want to see added to videos or whatever, put that down there too. I would love some suggestions on where to go, because the list that I showed in the very first video is sort of a guideline, but it is not set in stone. I can add videos to that list if I need. So there's that too. Yes, thanks again for watching, and we'll wrap it up here.